Hello, this is Reverend Jocelyn Mason, and I am doing the Good Friday service today here at church. Um, let's begin. Let's begin with just putting ourselves in the framework of the history of Good Friday. Good Friday is a part of the Christian tradition, and it teaches us that over 2,000 years ago, God performed a miracle. And this miracle resulted in the birth of Jesus Christ. Jesus was very man, but Jesus was also divine. He possessed great wisdom and insight, and many saw him as God made manifest. They witnessed miracles, signs and wonders, the raising of the dead, the healing of the sick, the lame walked, the blind saw. He turned water into wine. He did all of these great miracles. Others saw him as a threat, a troublemaker, a nuisance, a blasphemer, who said he was the Son of God. This was called blasphemy, to say that you were the Son of God in Jesus' day. Jesus was a man who ate with publicans and sinners. He went about stirring up the people. That's how they saw him. He just was trifling, going around stirring up the people, causing trouble. He cleared out the temple. He cast out the money changers who were breaking the Sabbath. And this challenged the authority of the high priests and the scribes of that day. And this brought forth the wrath of Caesar, who was the reigning prelate at the time. Others hated him enough to plot to kill him, even to have him crucified, which was the worst type of death during that time. It's impossible to be loved by everyone. Sometimes you're not loved by everyone, and sometimes you can be hated by others, even when your intentions are good. Anyone can be misunderstood. Your spiritual ideas can be questioned, your lifestyle, your background. People can just be curious about you and just be critical of you. So Jesus did many great works, but he was criticized for healing someone on the Sabbath day. Because they did not approve of him, they turned a blinded eye to all the great miracles that he did. They narrowly defined what should be believed, and Jesus challenged every belief that they had. They discounted him, and he discounted them for being. They discounted him for being an upstart. But Jesus is a great example to us. When the world turns on you, when you feel misunderstood, when your world turns upside down, think of Jesus as that prevailing example. So, unity teachings recognize the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We also recognize the Christ within everyone. We believe that there was a crucifixion and a resurrection. And that takes on a powerful meaning in our understanding of our own individual spiritual journeys and how we can be overcomers in this day. We all face internal, eternal, and external challenges, internal and external challenges in our lives. And Jesus' life was no different. For Jesus was taken before Pontius Pilate, and he was the Roman ruler at the time. And Pontius Pilate symbolizes the external struggle, external circumstances that seem overpowering. Pilate thinks he has the power, but Jesus clarifies that there is no power over him but God. Pontius Pilate did not want to be bothered with Jesus, though, because his wife had a dream and said, don't have anything to do with that man. And so Pontius Pilate washed his hands of the whole deal. Jesus came and Jesus demonstrated that no circumstance or situation or external authority figure has any power over him or you. This is also true of your life. Even though people may think they have control, you always remain in control of the way you choose to react to what is happening all around you in every situation. So ultimately, Jesus' sentence, it is one of the cruelest deaths imaginable, crucifixion. And the death was meant to strike fear into the hearts of all who would be disobedient of the prevailing law and power. So Jesus' sentence to be crucified. So what does this mean on a metaphysical level, this whole idea of the crucifixion? Well, his crucifixion takes on spiritual meaning. The crucifixion means the crossing out in consciousness of certain errors that have become fixed states of mind. So, in our mind, we have lots of error thoughts, and we are being led by, guided by, driven by those error thoughts that have become fixed states of mind. I'm not wise enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I don't have enough money. I'll never be successful. Blah, blah, blah. Those become fixed states of mind. But in the final extinction of the carnal mind, crucifixion helps us to bring that carnal mind under order. We have to give up the personality in order that the Christ mind may be expressed in us in its fullness. So every time we give up error thinking, there is a crucifixion. Every time we say, no, I'm not going to allow those negative thoughts to control me any longer, there's a crucifixion because we have to move past the weight of that and move into a state of freedom. So the scriptures say that Jesus spent 3 days in the tomb. And this represents the 3 steps in overcoming error. The first step is non resistance. The second is the taking on of divine activity or receiving the will of God. And the third is the assimilation and fulfillment of the divine will. So we have to move into a place of non resistance. We have to deny the self that we might unite with the selfless part of ourselves. We have to give up the mortal to obtain the immortality. When we live in fear of living full out, when we live in fear of living our highest and best self, we are bound often by our limiting thoughts about who we are and what we are capable of. At times, we fear our own inner power. So we have to resist that. We have to take on the divine activity of listening and opening up to the will of God. And then we have to fulfill the divine will that God has for our lives. So we don't want to allow a Pontius Pilate figure or an idea to block us. We want to be free from outside authority trying to dictate to us what our life should be. You see, Pilate represents judgment, our inner critic, the internal dialogue, our stories that are calling for crucifixion, these error states of mind that are calling to be crossed out so that we might be free. So, where and in what ways do you allow others to judge, ridicule, or kill your own goodness? Where does someone else become the authority in how you view and live like Jesus, our example? He lived full out. He lived a short life, but boy, did he live an extensive life in the time that he had. But Jesus also had to go through difficult times. As he prayed in the garden, he said, "Let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done." His human personality would have wanted to live, but his inner Christ awareness understood that there was a purpose for his life. What a great example of surrender. How could he surrender so completely? He understood eternity and the immortality of the spirit, that if something were to happen to his physical body, that his soul and spirit would live on in eternity. So he wasn't concerned about life or death. He was more concerned about the message that was his to bring. We can learn a lot from the Good Friday scriptures. If we look in the book of Luke, chapter 23, verses 32 to 42, we hear the story of Jesus hanging on the cross between two thieves. Now, matter of fact, one is concerned with human power, and one is concerned with spiritual power. The one thief is living in the past. When he says to Jesus, I know I deserve what I am getting because I know I have done a lot of negative things. However, you don't deserve this, Jesus. But this thief, he identified with all the negative things he had done in his past. The other thief said to Jesus, what is going to happen after all of this is over? He was living in the future. He was lost in future thought about what would happen next. But Jesus symbolically was in between these two thieves. And this represents the vortex of creativity, where heaven is revealed on earth. I love Charles Fillmore. He has such great words. It represents the here and now. So Jesus said, today shalt thou be with me in paradise. Today shall we be beyond this and be in paradise and be in peace. You see, paradise is in our own minds and hearts. We can be at peace when we allow ourselves to let go of worry and concern, surrender all those negative thoughts, and then move into a place that in this present moment, the light of God surrounds me. The love of God is with me. When we look even further at the Good Friday, we look at the cross. And the cross represents to cross out era thoughts. You see, we can get stuck in the past and we can be preoccupied with the future. We can have two different viewpoints, but what is happening now in the moment is what really counts. That is our choice moment to release ourselves from the past and to take time to be in the present, to hear with clarity the still small voice. The present is where we get to create our right and perfect future based on the thoughts and things that we are thinking now. Jesus understood that he was born to be the ultimate example of overcoming. He came, he shared, he taught, he healed, he blessed, and he trained disciples, followers. And he left us such a wonderful understanding of spirituality, of divine truth in the things that he said and taught while he was on earth. And so on this Good Friday, we want to cross out negativity. We want to symbolically leave it at the cross. We want to lay down the crosses that we bear in our life. And we want to move into an understanding that we too can experience a resurrection. We too can move into a new life. So let us be willing to release all negative thoughts. Let us surrender our will for the greater good that God has for us. Let us cross out error thoughts and free ourselves to live a freer, fuller, more abundant life. I want to share the daily word with you today that goes with this Good Friday service. The word for today is forgive. And the affirmation is, I freely forgive all others and myself. During times when I struggle to forgive, I remember the example of Jesus, who asks for God to forgive those who crucified him. If I am feeling a pain too great for me to offer genuine forgiveness, I affirm that in truth, the forgiving love of God is intended for everyone, no matter what they may have done. I remind myself that forgiveness is a process, and I am gentle and patient with myself as I continue to forgive. I practice self forgiveness as I remember it is human nature to be more critical of ourselves than we are of others. God's love heals all sorrow and helps me to forgive myself, other people, and all situations. Nothing beyond my ability to forgive, because in God, nothing is unforgivable. As I practice forgiveness, I let go completely. And the scripture comes from Luke chapter 23, verse 34. Then Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Jesus had great compassion on human beings. He was a human being and a divine being at the same time, and he reconciled. Therefore, he came to be a great example to us so that we could too reconcile our spiritual nature and our human nature. He gave us an example of also forgiving, letting go, crossing out the error thoughts that keep coming into our minds when we practice unforgiveness. Unforgiveness makes us a prisoner. We are not able to be free. So on this Good Friday, I invite you to follow Jesus' example, to forgive them for they do not know what they do. People may be acting from a place where you think they're fully aware of what they're doing and their actions, but they do not understand their true divine nature. They do not understand the God entity that lives in them, and therefore they act out of character. They haven't discovered the truth of the inner Christ within. And so we must, as followers of Jesus and as seeing him as our way shower and our elder brother, we look to his example and we want to implement that in our life by moving into forgiving, forgive. I want to leave you with the prayer for protection as we are going through this time of the pandemic health crisis, and a lot of things are happening around us. Um, so many things and so many people. We want to hold them all in prayer and in the light. And we know for ourselves and for others that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us as the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Have a blessed Good Friday. Think about the Christ example of forgiveness, but also forgiving yourself and letting go of anything that may be holding you back. I behold the Christ as you. God bless. Namaste.